Hi, I'm Sophia. Today I want to talk about something I hear about constantly and something that I think gets brushed off far too easily: sleep changing during menopause. And I want to start there with the brushing off, because almost every time this comes up, someone tells me some version of the same story. They mention their sleep to someone, maybe a doctor, maybe a friend, maybe a partner, and what they got back was some variation of, well, that's just your age, or everyone sleeps worse as they get older. Or worst of all, just a shrug. So let me say this clearly, right at the top. What you're experiencing is real. It is not you being dramatic. It is not you failing at some basic human function. And it is not something you just have to accept quietly because of what decade you're in. There are actual, well-documented physical changes happening, and they have real effects on sleep. You are not imagining it.
Now here's the part I actually want to spend time on. Because your hormones are changing is only useful if it comes with somewhere to go next.
The first thing worth looking at is temperature. Okay, let's talk about what's actually going on. One quick note before I do, because I think it actually matters. This process isn't one single event, it's a gradual shift. And people usually move through a stretch called perimenopause first, sometimes for several years, before reaching menopause itself. Hormone levels don't drop in a straight line during that time. They fluctuate, which is part of why symptoms can feel unpredictable, better some weeks and worse others. If that's been your experience, that inconsistency itself is actually consistent with what's normal here, not a sign something else is wrong. During this stage of life, hormone levels shift, and two of the big ones, estrogen and progesterone, both have connections to sleep. I'm not going to turn this into a biology lecture, because honestly, you don't need to memorize the mechanism to benefit from understanding it. The short version is this: those shifting levels can affect body temperature regulation, and they can affect how easily your body settles into and stays in deeper sleep. That's the piece most people never get told. And I want to name something directly here, because talking around it doesn't help anyone. Hot flashes and night sweats. These are some of the most commonly reported symptoms during this transition, and they happen because that same hormonal shift affects the part of your brain that regulates body temperature, making it more reactive than it used to be. A sudden heat surge in the middle of the night isn't random, and it isn't just getting warm. It's a real physiological event, and if it's happening to you, it's one of the most common reasons for waking up that people in this exact stage describe. And that's why the experience is so specific. It's usually not, I can't fall asleep. Most people I talk to fall asleep fine. It's the middle of the night that falls apart. You wake up, sometimes warm, sometimes just wide awake for no obvious reason, and then you're staring at the ceiling for an hour. If that sounds familiar, you're in very good company. If body temperature regulation is part of what's shifting, then your sleep environment matters more now than it used to. Sometimes a lot more. A room that felt perfectly comfortable 10 years ago might be too warm for you now. This is one of the easiest things to test, and one of the most commonly overlooked. Try cooling the room down a few degrees more than feels intuitive. Look at what your bedding is made of, because some fabrics trap heat far more than others. Make sure air is actually moving in the room instead of sitting still. I've heard from people who spent months chasing complicated solutions and then found that a couple of degrees made a noticeable difference. The second thing is consistency, and I know this one isn't glamorous. But when your internal signals are less reliable than they used to be, external structure carries more of the weight. Going to bed and getting up at roughly the same time, even on weekends, gives your body a steady reference point when its own signals are noisier than usual. This is genuinely one of the highest value habits in this whole conversation, and it costs nothing. I hope these tips help you find more rest. Third is light. Your internal clock takes strong cues from light exposure, and this doesn't change with age. If anything, it becomes a more useful lever precisely because other signals have gotten less reliable. Getting natural light earlier in the day, even indirect light through a window, helps anchor that clock. And in the evening, this cuts both ways. Screens are one of the biggest culprits, not because of anything mysterious, but because the light they put out signals to your brain that it's still daytime, right when you're trying to wind down. Dimming things down in the hour or two before bed and putting the phone somewhere other than right next to your face gives your body a clear signal that the day is actually ending. It sounds almost too simple to be worth mentioning. It isn't. Fourth, and this is the one people are usually most eager to jump to, supplements. Magnesium, melatonin, and others come up in this conversation constantly. I'm not going to tell you what to take, because that's a real conversation for you and your doctor or pharmacist, especially if you're taking anything else where interactions matter. But I'll say this. It's a completely reasonable thing to raise at your next appointment, and you shouldn't feel silly bringing it up. Bring it up. Which brings me back around to where we started. If you have raised this and been brushed off, I'd encourage you to raise it again and to be specific when you do. I'm not sleeping well is easy to wave away. Something like, I fall asleep fine, but I wake up between 2 and 4 almost every night, sometimes with a heat surge. It's been going on for 6 months, and by afternoon I can barely focus, is much harder to dismiss. That's not a script to memorize word for word. It's just an example of what specific sounds like compared to vague. Specifics change the conversation.
There's one more piece I want to leave you with.
Track it for a couple of weeks if you can, so you're walking in with a pattern rather than an impression. And I want to be honest with you about expectations, because I think that matters more than false reassurance. For most people, this isn't one change that fixes everything overnight. It's usually several small things stacked together, adjusted over weeks, not days. That's not a discouraging answer. It's just the real one. What does gradual actually look like in practice? Usually it's something like this. You cool the room down, and maybe nothing changes for a week. Then you add the consistent bedtime, and 1 or 2 nights start feeling a little different. A few weeks in, you're not counting every wake-up anymore. You're just sleeping better more nights than not. It rarely feels like a breakthrough. It feels like slowly forgetting to worry about it as much. The people who tell me they eventually got their sleep back almost always describe it that way. Gradual, cumulative, and worth it. If you're not sure what a realistic sleep and wake schedule would even look like for you right now, that's exactly why we built the free calculator linked below. It's a quick way to see what consistent windows could look like based on 90-minute cycles, instead of guessing. And if the middle of the night waking is the part that's hitting you hardest, I have a whole video on why your brain does that and what actually helps in the moment. That one's linked right here. I'd really like to know, have you brought this up with someone and felt dismissed? Or has someone actually taken it seriously? Tell me in the comments, because I think a lot of people reading them would find it useful to know they're not the only one. Sleep well. I hope this helps you find the rest you deserve tonight.